I was rinsing blueberries for a pie when I heard my name carried in on the porch breeze, the same breeze that makes my little wind chimes tattle on anyone who lingers too long outside. Morning light laid itself across the kitchen like warm honey. The sunflower apron I've worn for years hung on the hook by the back door, waiting like it always does for me to tie myself into everybody else's plans. I didn't put it on. Brooke's voice floated in first, bright and sugary in that way that makes your teeth ache. She was on a call with her cousin FaceTime by the sound of it standing out on my back steps like the house was hers. "We're all set," she said. "Buffett's covered, and childcare too. Mom Harper signed the volunteer form. Free and clear." She laughed, a little puff of pride that made my chest go tight. Volunteer. I set the berries down and wiped my hands. I didn't say a word, just stood quiet by the screen door and let my wind chimes keep talking for me. Brooke kept going, turning her voice down in that pretend private way. 14 kids during the reception. She's done it her whole life anyway. She'll be happy to have something to do. A pause, then a whisper. And it keeps the grown-up conversations smooth. Grown-up conversations. As if at 68 I'm a child who needs a busy box. I looked at the apron. The little seeds on those sunflowers are worn smooth from years of washing, years of course, honey, and don't you worry, I've got it. The longer I stared, the more it looked like a leash. You should know this about me. I've fed entire football teams out of this kitchen. I've stretched church budgets with gumbo and grace. I've patched a life together after burying the only man who ever called me Evie like a prayer. I've said yes so many times, my mouth learned the shape before my brain caught up. But that morning, something in me went still like a pond when the wind stops, still enough to hear what's really being said. Brooke lowered her voice again, but I still caught the part that mattered. I sent the run of show to the marina. She's listed as kitchen lead and childcare coordinator. It's official, her e-signature came through last night. My e-signature? I don't spook easy, but a cold peel of anger slid down my arms. Not the loud kind, the clean kind, like when you realize you've been driving on a spare tire for years and finally see the nail. I stayed there, one hand on the doorframe, and let the details line up like grocery items on a belt. 14 kids, buffet, cleanup, and a digital scribble that says, I consented. No one had asked me if I wanted those hours back from my life. No one had called to check if my knees can do a 6-hour chase anymore. They'd just filed me under taken care of. It would have been easy to march out and set the porch on fire with my temper, but I've learned the hard way that hot anger signs things, cold anger files things. So I reached for a pen instead of the apron and wrote down exactly what I heard. The time, the date, the way my name felt heavy in their mouths. The wind chimes quieted. The house listened with me. I lifted the apron off the hook and folded it across the chair. It felt lighter that way, like it belonged to me again. Not today, I told it. Maybe I was telling myself. A buzz rattled the phone on my counter, an email ding that always lands like a pebble in a pond. Subject line, volunteer confirmation, signature captured. I opened it and saw my name curled at the bottom of a form I've never laid eyes on. Kitchen lead. Child care tent. Check-in at 6 a.m. at the marina. I stared until the screen went dim, and my reflection looked back at me. Lines, freckles, a woman who has fed a whole town without asking for applause. My hands didn't shake, which surprised me. They wanted me on the clock. I was finally on the record. If that signature is mine, why can't I remember ever saying yes? Savannah has a way of softening even the hardest memory. The river air smells like tin and magnolia, and the oaks lean over you like aunties with good advice. I grew up learning that when company comes, you put another potato in the pot. I married a man who could fix anything with a socket wrench and a hymn. When cancer took him, I learned to fix the silence with a wooden spoon and a big dented stock pot. For 30 years, I ran a school kitchen where payday meant kids waved their pizza slices like flags. I could look at a pan and know if it would feed football team hungry or just got baptized hungry. On Saturdays, I hauled pies to the farmer's market and made change from a floral coin purse that still smells faintly of nutmeg. Church potlucks? I was the one who knew the difference between a pinch and no baby, that's a tablespoon. Folks call that a gift. Sometimes it felt like an expectation wearing perfume. Danny, my boy, grew up on the edge of that stove. He learned fractions from measuring cups and kindness from the line that always forms when a town needs to be fed. He's a good man, soft-spoken, smart enough to build a website in an afternoon, but not always brave enough to say the hard thing when someone he loves is excited. He got comfortable with a phrase that took root in our house like a weed. Mom will handle it. He's now ever. After his daddy died, Mom will handle it, kept the lights on and the laundry folded and grief tamed into something you can carry to the curb on Tuesday mornings. But there's a quiet cost to being the dependable one. People stop asking if you can. They start assuming you will. That afternoon, Brooke and Danny came by to drop a few details, which is the kind of sentence that never means a few. Brooke breezed in with her caramel latte and her pretty on-purpose smile, the kind that says, I'm easygoing, but do it my way. She kissed my cheek and told me I looked so cute, which I never know what to do with past 65. Danny hung back, eyes on his shoes, grateful for whoever would steer the conversation so he wouldn't have to. Brooke set a binder on my table like a hostess placing a cake, pale pink cover, gold letters, run of show, tabs for every hour. She flipped to a page already peppered with highlighter. Okay, Mama Harper, she chirped, like we'd rehearsed this. Kitchen lead, low country boil, cornbread, market salad, then childcare coverage during the reception just until the sparkler send-off. And then a quick flip of the room so the after-party can look clean on stories. You're a lifesaver. She slid a pen toward me without looking at my hands. My sunflower apron was folded on the chair where I'd left it, a square of bright that suddenly felt like a caution sign. I didn't pick it up. I folded it again, smaller. The way you fold a letter you're not sure you should send. Brooke, I said, aiming for gentle. That's 3 jobs. She blinked like I'd complimented her earrings. You're the only one I trust with food safety, and you're so good with kids. Plus, you always stay late to clean. Remember the Easter brunch? You were a machine. She laughed in a way that made machine sound flattering. Danny cleared his throat. Babe, maybe. Danny, she sang without turning. Your mom is a pro. This is her happy place. Is it? I thought, and the quiet in me answered before I did. From the corner of my eye, I caught Rita's silhouette on the porch, framed in chinnaberry leaves. My neighbor, my nurse best friend, the woman who once taught me to say, no, thank you, without adding a casserole. She gave me the smallest nod. Pastor Leon's words floated back from last Sunday like a hymn's last verse. Love is not a ledger you can force people to balance. I kept my voice level. Who added me to this schedule? Brooke tapped the binder. The venue needs names. I went ahead and plugged you in so a vendor doesn't grab your slot. You're my secret weapon. Secret weapon sounds flattering too until you realize weapons don't get asked whether they want to be fired. I looked at Danny. He met my eyes finally, and the guilt in them told me he'd seen the page before I did. Mom, I thought you liked. He ran out of sentence and Brooke filled the air with enthusiasm the way she always does. We'll get you a volunteer badge, she said, spinning a coaster like a coin. Cute, right? And I made a Canvas schedule for the childcare tent so parents feel comfy. We tested it with my followers. Everyone loved the idea. There's the rub. The idea is lovely. The assumption is not. I stood, took the binder as if it were hot, and set it on the counter. Brooke, honey, I love to help, but this reads like I'm staff. She laughed like I'd told a joke. You're family. That's better than staff. I folded the apron one last time and slid it into the drawer by the stove. The sound of wood closing felt like a small door clicking shut inside my chest. Family, I said, means you ask before you assign. The room got still. Even the wind chimes outside seemed to hold their breath. Brooke recovered with a smile, a shade too bright. We'll sort it out, she sang, already reaching for her latte. You're the best. My phone buzzed on the counter. Another email lit the screen, and the subject line was a mirror held up to the binder between us. Volunteer confirmation, signature captured. That itinerary didn't make me the mother of the groom. It made me the help. Rita didn't even knock. She came in with her gray bob frizzing from the humidity and a look that said, sit, breathe. Before you light anybody up, she said, already pulling a tiny spiral notebook from her purse. We're doing this my way. Calm, collect, confirm. I could feel the old heat in me ask for the wheel, the part that wanted to march across town and bang on a certain front door. But Rita's voice is the kind that has coaxed morphine-shy patients to sleep. I let it settle my shoulders. Calm. We made tea. I wrote down the exact words I'd heard, the time on the stove clock, and that email subject line that felt like a slap. Collect. Rita circled the word signature and drew a little arrow to who captured it. Confirm, she mouthed, like a catechism. We drove to the marina office, where the air smells like weathered rope and old sunscreen. Caleb, the events manager, could have been one of my former students. Polite, careful, a little too caffeinated. "Miss Harper," he said, when he saw my name on Rita's notebook. "How can I help?" I slid the phone across the counter and tapped the email. "Someone says I signed up to run a kitchen and a child care tent at my son's wedding. I did not." That was not manned. Caleb scanned, then looked at his screen, the kind of frown that belongs to people who like getting things right. "We use a web portal," he said, hands moving fast over the keys. "It logs who submits forms and where they come from." He clicked, scrolled, then paused. "Okay, the volunteer roster file, it's named Harper. Kitchen lead, PDF, was uploaded last night at 11:42 p.m. His eyes flicked to me. "But the e-signature wasn't drawn on this machine." "Whose was it?" Rita asked. The way nurses ask questions, no apology, just precision. Caleb turned the monitor so I could see. A row of tiny entries, timestamps, IP addresses, browser versions. It looked like nothing and everything at once. He pointed to a line. "Submission came from a residential IP. The billing on that IP is the Ellis address." He swallowed like he'd just realized what that meant. "That's Brooke's house, right?" I didn't feel the hot flare I expected, just a cold, clear click, like a lock finding the right groove. "Can you print that?" I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "I can print the access log and the upload confirmation. No content from inside the form that's private to the submitter, but the metadata is yours to have." He hit print, and the machine in the corner chattered to life. Rita leaned in. "Chain of facts," she murmured, instead of the word she really wanted to use. "Good." He was licked yet now there. Caleb slid the pages into one of those plastic sleeves people use for menus. "Also," he said, keeping his voice low, "the run of show we received lists you as kitchen lead and child care coordinator. It flags you as confirmed with an E-sign." He glanced at me like he was bracing for a storm. "If that isn't accurate, I'm sorry it got this far." "Thank you for showing me," I said. My voice surprised me by staying even. "I'm not mad at you, baby. I'm glad the truth leaves footprints." On the way out, we sat for a minute on the dock. Boats shouldered the water like tired horses. A gull screamed about something that wasn't its business. I put the printouts on my lap and smoothed them, the way I'd smooth a tablecloth before a meal. The sunflower apron wasn't with me. It was exactly where it needed to be folded at home, not around my waist. Instead, I had my pen, heavy and honest, and my blue recipe box waiting back on the counter, recipes on one side of my life, records on the other. Pastor Leon called just then, as if Rita had texted Angel Dispatch. "Evie," he said, gentle as Sunday, "I heard there's a storm brewing." "Not a storm," I said, watching a line of whitecaps scallop the river. "A tide change." He hummed. "Remember, truth doesn't yell. It stands. You don't owe anybody a scene. You owe yourself a clear sentence." Pretension pros. After we hung up, I wrote a clear one in Rita's notebook. I did not consent. Then I added the time, the place, the names. My handwriting has always been tidy lunch lady neat, Danny used to call it. Today it felt like scaffolding. Back home, I laid the marina logs beneath the email printout and paperclipped them like a little case file. I put the stack by the recipe box and set my pen on top. Not to sign anything, to remember. You'll ask if I called Brooke. I didn't. The truth had already called me, and I was still picking it up. Rita stood, cracked her knuckles, and grinned in that wolfish way that makes me braver. "So," she said, "they've put you on a staff list without asking. What happens when staff doesn't show?" I looked at the tidy stack of paper, then at the empty hook where the apron would have hung if this were any other year. "I guess," I said, feeling the calm come back like a tide. "We're about to find out." By late afternoon, my phone started doing that nervous little dance across the counter buzz, pause, buzz, as if it were trying to jump off the edge before the day got any sillier. Brooke had spun up a group thread called Wedding Ops, which tells you everything about the tone and nothing about the content. There were 20-something names in there: DJ, florist, photographer, a cousin who does balloons, a neighbor with a truck, and right in the middle, like a sticky note slapped on a forehead, Evelyn kitchen lead, childcare coordinator, cleanup, staff, in other words, across 3 shifts. The thread pinged with enthusiasm that read like orders in a Halloween costume. "Team," Brooke wrote, "we're a village. Here's the updated run of show." She attached a Canva schedule so pastel it could have been a gender reveal. Under 6 a.m., check-in at the marina, there was my name again, stamped confirmed as if a stamp could make a choice. Danny chimed in with a thumbs up. I stared at his little yellow hand until the shape hurt. My boy has never been cruel. He's just been eased into a habit by 1,000 tiny asks. "Mom will handle it. Doesn't sound like a knife. It just cuts like one." Rita was at my kitchen table, flipping through her tiny notebook like a pharmacist counting pills. "Don't bite," she said, seeing my jaw set. "Breathe. We already have what matters: time, text, and the trail." She tapped the printouts from the marina. "Now we start taking the hooks out of your skin." "What hooks?" "The ones they set with your card and your calendar," she said, calm like a metronome. "What orders are sitting out there with your name and your money on them? It's not tincture, right? The shrimp boil, the corn, the sausage, the sheet trays on hold at the rental place, the 30 pounds of flour I'd told myself I might as well pick up because cornbread keeps a family honest." I opened my blue recipe box, not for a recipe this time, but for the stack of little payment slips I tuck between cards. Habits save you even when you start them for the wrong reasons. We made a list: supplier, order number, deposit status, cancellation deadline. Rita dialed while I held the folder open and nodded through every "we hate to lose your business" speech, like a woman learning to say her name again. I paid a couple of small fees and wrote them down: date and time, who I spoke with, what they confirmed. When each vendor said, "Can I ask why?" I answered the same clean sentence: "A family assignment was made without my consent. I won't be fulfilling it." It felt good. Not gloating good. Clean sink good. Like finding the bottom of the muck and planting your heels. Meanwhile, Wedding Ops had turned into a parade. Someone posted a Pinterest board of childcare tent ideas, chalkboards and bubbles, and a sign that said, "Kid Corral," which made me smile because honesty leaks out even when you're trying to be cute. Brooke tagged me 3 times in 20 minutes. "Evelyn, can you confirm head count for catering?" "Evelyn, I ordered the disposable pans you like." "Evelyn, can you bring your church coolers? You know, the big orange ones." I didn't type a word. I took a picture of the email header, "Volunteer Confirmation Signature Captured," and paperclipped it to the marina logs. I wrote entry number 1 inch, the little notebook Rita had pushed toward me, and in my neat lunch lady hand, logged the day, added to staff list without request. E-signature captured from Brooke's address. I listed the pings and more pings. I printed the thread and slipped it behind the log. Paper beats performance. I'd heard it somewhere. Maybe I'd always known. Somewhere between the corn and the cake stands, Danny texted privately, "Mom, all okay? Brooke is just excited. She needs you." He added a heart, and I had to sit down because it is a very particular kind of tired to receive love in the same sentence you are being asked to disappear. I typed back, "I love you. I'm not staff. We'll talk soon." I watched the dots bubble and vanish. He didn't answer. Maybe he needed to think. Maybe he needed permission to. Brooke kept the thread rolling, tossing around "team," as if the word itself could hold people in place. She posted a screenshot of a volunteer badge template with my name under Department. Department. Sweet Lord. Rita read over my shoulder and huffed. "A badge is just a sticker with delusions," she said. "Keep going." So we did. The florist on River Street canceled the extra centerpieces that I had been gift scheduling. The rental company released the food warmers I'd reserved, just in case. The fishmonger promised to relist the shrimp without charging me a restock. Every voice on the other end acted like they'd just seen a dog walk on its hind legs. "At your age," one man blurted before catching himself. "I mean, you deserve to sit and be celebrated." I smiled into the phone and wrote his name down too. By supper, my stack on the counter had turned into a little case file. Emails, logs, receipts, names, times. I set it next to the sunflower apron, which I had folded into a tidy square and laid on the chair like it was visiting, not living here. I ran my fingers over the printed petals. For the first time in years, the apron didn't feel like my job. It felt like my choice. Outside, the wind chimes caught a new little breeze. Not a storm, just air moving in a direction I could stand in. "Now what?" I asked Rita. "Now nothing," she said, and her nurse eyes softened. "We've taken back your time and your wallet. Let their schedule hit reality on its own. If there's a conversation, it happens on your porch, with your papers, on your terms. Heaven dan and round of business." I poured us sweet tea and watched the screen light again. Brooke had posted a color-coded grid with the caption, "We are locked in, y'all." It had my name 3 times, bolded. I clicked the phone dark and slid it beneath the folder. "I'm not their chef anymore," I said, surprising myself with how easy it came. "I'm the record keeper." And that, more than any speech I could have given on a porch, felt like the first good decision I'd made in a very long time. The morning of the rehearsal, the house felt like it was holding its breath for me. Coffee steamed in the chipped blue mug my husband favored, and the sunflower apron sat folded on the chair like a question I'd already answered. I stood in the doorway a long minute, listening to my wind chimes gossip with the river breeze, and thought, if not now, when? Rita pulled up with the trunk already popped. She's the only woman I know who can make a getaway look like a doctor's appointment, calm, on time, and nobody's business. "Suitcase?" she asked. I lifted mine and, without looking at it too hard, slipped the apron in on top, not as armor, as a reminder of who decides when it's worn. Before we left, I wrote a card in the tidy lunch lady script Danny teases me about. I set it on the kitchen table where he's eaten 100 bowls of gumbo and bad news. "Don't wait on me. And don't wait on the pot. Love you, Mom." I propped it against the blue recipe box, a little gravestone for a roll that died of overuse. The highway out to Street Simons unfurls like an invitation, marsh grass waving its 1,000 green hands, billboards for peaches and fireworks. Rita drove, and I let the scenery iron the wrinkles in my chest. We didn't talk much, which is the gift of an old friend, someone who can make silence feel like a bath. Halfway over the causeway, my phone rang like a fire alarm. Danny's name filled the screen in big, worried letters. I could hear his breath before he spoke. "Mom? Where are you?" "Great. I'm on my way to the island," I said, and my voice surprised me by sounding rested, like it was coming from the part of me that sleeps through storms. "Rita and I booked a little cottage by the water. But the rehearsal," he stopped, like he was trying to herd 6 thoughts through one narrow door. "Brooke needs you at the marina at 6. "I'm sure she needs a lot of things," I said, gentle as I knew how. "None of them are mine to supply today." Silence. Then the boy and the man. "Did we do something?" "Yes," I said, "because there are days when the truth is the only kind of love that counts." Someone put my name on staff without asking me. Someone captured a signature that isn't mine and turned my yes-shaped heart into a free labor policy. Brooke didn't mean... Intent and impact are cousins who don't always speak. I watched a sailboat cut a neat white line where sky meets water. "I love you enough to let you feel this. I love me enough not to fix it for you." He swallowed. I heard it. "What are we supposed to do about the buffet? The kids? People are counting on you," I said, and I let that word sit between us like a chair at a table that never had one for me. "You're a grown man with a full-time job and a fiancé who plans for a living. Hire who you need to hire. Scale down. Order trays from the grocery store. Cancel anything you cannot do without turning your mother into a volunteer army. This feels cruel," he said, and there it was. The ache that used to move me like a yoke. "It is not cruel to return what was taken," I said. It is not cruel to say no to work you did not agree to. I breathed once, deep enough to feel the seatbelt hum against my collarbone. Danny, this is a lesson I should have taught you when you were 8 with a science fair and a poster board ask before you assign. Today will teach it better than I ever did. He didn't speak, and that silence was a new thing. No guilt, no scramble, just room. Will you come tomorrow? He asked finally, so soft it nicked me. If the first word I hear is sorry and not come back, I said. If I am a guest with a seat and not a department with a shift, I will not run your tent. I will not fix what was planned around my disappearance. I will love you in a way that makes you more of a man and me more of a person. That's my RSVP. He exhaled. Okay, I echoed, and let the old habit of promising die where it stood. We found the cottage just off the water, the kind of place that smells like salt and old magazines. The windows opened like sighs. I put the suitcase on the bed and took the apron out. I folded it small, smaller than I knew it could go, and slid it into the dresser drawer. The little wooden slide made a sound like a click in my chest. Shut. Not forever, just for this story. My phone kept up its panic pings from wedding ops, a call from Brooke, 2 from unknown numbers, the digital version of someone rattling your door. I set it face down and poured tea. Rita picked a book from the shelf like a sommelier chooses a wine. We sat and let the marsh do its slow ballet. You think peace is a big feeling, but it's actually small. It's the sound a spoon makes when it finds the bottom of a cup. It's your shoulders forgetting to live by your ears. It's the way the air feels when you finally step out of a kitchen you've been told is yours, because you're the only one who knows where the pots live. As the sun shrugged lower, I flipped my phone once, just to promise myself I wasn't hiding. 17 missed calls, a handful of texts with the frantic tone of people discovering gravity. I answered none of them. I am not in hiding, I told the porch, the water, myself. I am in plain sight, in a place I chose, waiting to be invited with respect rather than summoned with assumption. If they understand, I'll hear it in the first word. I woke up to gulls arguing and the kind of light that makes water look like it's remembering the sun. The cottage floor was cool on my feet. I hung the sunflower apron on the little brass hook by the door, not as a promise but as punctuation. I brewed coffee and let the steam rinse the last of my nerves. Somewhere across the marsh, a clubhouse was unlocking a walk-in cooler for food I hadn't ordered. My phone had opinions. Overnight, wedding ops had turned into a hive, pings stacked on pings, emojis marching like ants around a spill. At 7:03 a.m., someone asked, "Where are the boil pots?" At 7:09, "Does anyone have Evelyn's cooler keys?" At 7:22, "Head count for the kid tent?" My name sat in sentences like a missing wrench. I didn't answer. I buttered toast and opened Rita's travel crossword. The cottage felt like a held note you don't want to release. By 9, the tone shifted. Enthusiasm gave way to math. A cousin offered to pick up deli trays. The DJ, God bless him, suggested calling the grocery store for chicken buckets. Brooke tagged me and used 3 pleases in one sentence. Danny texted separately. "Mom, we're in a bind. Can you help just with the children? 6 hours, tops. We'll pay you." I set the phone face up on the table and watched the words sit there. 6 hours, tops. I did what 40 years in kitchens trained me to do. I did the math. At market rates, I typed back, group childcare runs per child, per hour. 14 children at a modest rate for 6 hours is more than what you've just offered. Also, I am not a service you can hire mid-ceremony. I erased the last sentence and left the math. Clean sentences travel farther. He tried again. A higher number. A promise to make it up. A heart. I pressed my palm flat on the table until I could feel the grain. "I love you," I wrote. "Hire professionals. Scale your menu. Do not plan your day around my disappearance." Rita came in from her walk with 2 small muffins and a smile that said she'd peeked at the tide chart. "How's the weather on your phone?" she asked. "Stormy in places," I said. "Clear where I am." "He's prime salve." She set a muffin by my coffee and nodded at the apron on the hook. "Looks good there." "It does." It looked like what it was, mine. At noon, the thread started using the word urgent. Parents wanted to know who was watching their babies. Someone asked if the venue had staff. Caleb, bless his administrative heart, replied with a screenshot of policy. Hosts provide childcare. Venue does not supervise minors. Facts are a kindness in their own way. Then my screen lit with Brooke's name. I let it ring. She called again. The third time I answered, because I'm Southern and old habits have manners. Evelyn, she said without hello, voice pitched high and thin. We're melting down. There's no food plan, and the toddlers are... She broke off, and I could hear crowd noise, the rustle of expensive fabric moving faster than it wanted to. We need you. I'm having coffee by the water, I said, because sometimes information is a balm. I hope your day is lovely. You promised. I didn't, I said, and I let the quiet carry the weight of the proof sitting on my kitchen counter at home. You put me on a schedule without my yes. I took myself off without your permission. She started to cry in the way that is mostly anger. People are asking where you are. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them the mother of the groom attends as a guest, or not at all. Tell them the menu is different because respect is the first ingredient. That's not helpful, she snapped. It's accurate, I said gently. Helpful would have happened last week. She offered money then, numbers rising like a thermometer. I thanked her for finally understanding that labor has a price and reminded her that I was not for sale today. We hung up before either of us said something we couldn't put back. I walked down to the dock with Rita, and we let our calves learn the language of steps and sunlight. My phone buzzed on the porch rail like a trapped fly. I let it. A breeze moved through the screen and lifted the edge of a magazine. The marsh did its slow applause. Later, Danny texted just 3 words. I get it. That loosened something behind my ribs, not because he surrendered, but because he stood up straight. By late afternoon, a photo hit the thread. Paper plates, store-bought sides, kids sitting on quilts while an aunt tried to invent rules on the fly. It wasn't tragic. It was simply honest. Reality had arrived to a party planned without it. I poured more coffee and looked at the apron, catching a square of sun by the door. They'd learned a lesson I couldn't have taught if I'd shown up. A schedule is not consent. A mother is not a department. Tomorrow would be for conversations. Today was for keeping my word to myself. Night on the island makes a different kind of quiet, the kind that doesn't ask for anything. The cottage windows breathed in salt and crickets, and the tide pulled at the shore like someone smoothing a bedspread. Rita read with her feet tucked under her like a cat. I sat at the little table with a pen and a pad, and the feeling you get before a hard conversation, only this time, the person I had to face was me. You know how a kitchen remembers you? The way a spoon finds the same drawer? The way your hand goes to the same spice without looking? That's how I've moved through my life muscle memory of yes. I have always been the person who can make not enough stretch into more than plenty. It's a beautiful skill until it becomes a leash. And if I'm honest, I tied that leash to my own wrist. I said it out loud so there'd be no mistaking it. I trained them. Not Danny, my good-hearted boy, who learned what he was taught. Not even Brooke, born into a world that claps for women who make it happen. Me. I trained the room to expect me before the question was asked. I trained the room to believe I was a resource, not a person with limits. I trained my own mouth to reach for yes, even when my knees said otherwise. Rita closed her book like a benediction. Naming it is the bravest part, she said, nurse plain. Now take off the part that isn't yours and keep the part that is. And how's of it now? What part is mine? The story you tell about what love requires. I let that sit in the saucer of silence between us. Then I wrote misbelief at the top of the page big enough to make my hand ache. If I love you, I don't get to say no. The sentence looked ridiculous in ink, smaller than it felt in my bones. I drew a line through it so dark the paper bruised. Under it, I wrote, New belief. If I love you, I will be honest about what I can offer. If you love me, you will treat my honesty like a gift, not a loophole. Pastor Leon called right then, like he could feel the tide turning. Evie, he said, and I could hear the soft clink of his mug. How's your weather? Warm, I said. Clear. It many felf, he hummed. I'm not here to give advice, just to hold a light while you walk. Remember this, forgiveness is a process, Respect is a condition. You can work on the first without compromising the second. I needed that, I said, and I did. After we hung up, I took a recipe card from my blue box, not for gumbo or cornbread this time, but for something I'd never written down, because I'd never allowed myself to need it. Boundary card. I labeled it, neat as a lunch menu. And then, I am not unpaid staff. If I cook, it is a gift I choose, not a debt I owe. Ask before you assign. If your plan needs me, include my voice at the planning table. No is not unloving. My refusal is not a verdict on your worth. It is a truth about my capacity. Rita leaned over my shoulder. Frame it, she said, or laminate it if you must. We laughed, and the laugh was an exhale I'd been saving for years. I stood, walked to the little dresser, and opened the top drawer. The sunflower apron lay there, soft from 1,000 wash cycles, smelling faintly of lemon oil and cinnamon. I lifted it, folded it down to the size of a napkin smaller than I knew it could be, and set it at the very back of the drawer. Then I closed the drawer with a gentle push. The click it made was so clean I felt it under my ribs. Not banishment, not punishment. A boundary. My work clothes don't get to live on the hook like a fire alarm anymore. They live where I put them, for when I choose them. I wrote one more line on the card. How I'll enforce this: conversations happen on my porch, with my papers in reach, and the first word must be sorry. Rita made tea. We sat on the floor like girls at a sleepover and told the truth the way women do when no one is watching. She told me about nights she'd stayed past shift because she couldn't stand to leave one more mother with a feverish kid and no car seat. I told her about the time I drove pies across 3 counties because a cousin said, "Please," like a siren. We counted the ways our good intentions had made clever thieves out of other people's needs. We promised each other to love better by promising less. My phone was blessedly quiet. Either the wedding had found its level, or the night had swallowed the chaos. I didn't check. I didn't need to. Before bed, I propped the boundary card against the salt shaker on the tiny cottage table and read it out loud, the way a person reads a grace they mean. It didn't sound like a manifesto. It sounded like home. You asked me, back when this started, what I wanted out of all this. I thought it was a good wedding and a happy son. Tonight I know better. I want a life where my love is generous and my dignity intact. I want to stop mistaking exhaustion for devotion. I turned off the lamp and lay down in a room that was not mine and felt more mine than any room I've been in for years. Tomorrow there will be calls and explanations and apologies that may or may not be the kind that stick. That's fine. I've done my part. Morning will find me on my porch, papers stacked, heart steady. I won't be there to apologize. I'll be there to set terms. I got home before the heat could bully the afternoon into a haze. I set the blue recipe box on the coffee table and stacked the Marina printouts on top, the access log, with Brooke's address, the upload time, the email that had curled my name into a lie. Beside the papers, I placed the sunflower apron, folded into a tidy square, not as clothing but as evidence, what I have worn, what I no longer owe. Danny's car pulled in slow, like he was easing up to a truth he wasn't sure would let him in. He came onto the porch with his shoulders forward, hands empty. He didn't try to hug first. That was new. He looked at the stack and then at me. "Mom," he said, voice rough around the edges. "I need to say I'm sorry." "I'll listen," I said, "and I'll show." We sat. I slid the top page toward him, the Marina log, with its tiny row of numbers and the line that mattered bolded in highlighter. "This is where your fiancé's house signed my name," I said, not unkind. "This is what the venue received. This is the schedule that made me a department." He read. I watched the moment land, the place where defensiveness turned into understanding the way milk turns into butter when you work it long enough. "I saw the binder," he whispered. "I didn't see this." "You didn't look for it," I said, gentle but straight. "You assumed a yes because I have given you so many. That assumption is the first thing that changes." He nodded, almost a bow. "I see that. It's tent." I opened the recipe box and pulled out a 4x6 card that wasn't a recipe. "This is my boundary card," I told him, and I read the lines without apologizing, the way you read the rules of a game you want to play fairly. "I am not unpaid staff. Ask before you assign. No is not unloving. His mouth trembled. I hurt you. You joined a habit, I said. Then you kept it running. I hurt myself by training you for it. That stops here. He breathed in, held it, let it go. Tell me what stop looks like. I took a pen, the same pen I used to label pies, and wrote 3 questions on another card. Neat as a lunch menu. Do you want to do this? Can you do this time, money, body? Should you do this, will it keep the relationship healthy? These get asked, I said, tapping each with the pen, before my name appears anywhere. If the answer to any is no, the ask is either modified or dropped, and every request lives in writing. No more hallway promises. If your plan depends on me, you bring me to the planning table, not the cleanup crew. He nodded again, harder this time. We'll do it. I'll do it. I'm not collecting promises, I said. I'm collecting paperwork. I slid a single page across the table. Simple, black ink, nothing legal fancy. Family boundaries acknowledgement. 2 paragraphs and a signature line. It didn't threaten anything. It just put the new weather on paper. He read all the way to the bottom, then looked up. This isn't about punishment. It's about muscle memory, I said. When you're stressed, you'll reach for what you've always reached for me. This puts your hand somewhere else first. He signed. His name looked like his father's for a heartbeat, and that did me in more than anything. He set the pen down carefully, like it might bruise. What about Brooke? He asked, softer. She wants to apologize. I want the truth first, I said. Not a performance. I want her to know the difference between excitement and entitlement. And I want her to make the same acknowledgement you just did. Ask, can, should, in writing. Then we can talk about apologies. Danny rubbed his face and laughed a little without humor. You sound like Pastor Leon. I sound like a woman who edited herself for 40 years, I said. And I smiled because there was nothing mean in it. And who is done with track changes? He glanced at the apron. Will you wear it again? When I choose to, I said. When I'm a guest who brings a dish, not a department with a shift. We sat there with the papers between us like a small miracle so ordinary it could be missed. He reached for my hand and didn't try to fix anything with it, just held it the way a son holds his mother when he's finally learned her hand is not a lever. The doorbell rang. A small sound, but it jumped. Danny looked at me. I nodded. Through the glass, I saw Brooke on the porch, no makeup, hair pulled back, a bouquet that looked cut from a roadside ditch rather than a florist. She wasn't smiling. Good. The truth rarely arrives grinning. Let her in, I said, folding the apron a little tighter on the table. We'll start with what's real. Brooke came in like a weather front that hadn't decided which way to break. No lashes, no gloss, just a bouquet that looked honest, wild things with dirt still on their ankles. She stood on the porch boards and didn't try to step past me. That was already better than last week. Evelyn, she said, voice small enough to fit in a pocket. May I? You may sit, I said. And I gestured to the chair across from the blue recipe box and the neat stack of printouts. The sunflower apron sat folded between us like a bright witness. Danny stayed beside the door, not to police anything, but to learn. I slid the marina logs to the edge of the table and tapped the highlighted line. This is the address the signature came from, I said. And this is the time. I was not at your house at 11:42 p.m. Brooke's throat moved, once, twice, like she was trying to swallow a stone. She didn't reach for the paper. She looked at it. The way you look at a mirror you finally admit is accurate. It was me, she said, the words dry and quiet. I filled the form. I waited. That word has weight, if you let it. I didn't draw your name, she added fast, and then slower, like she heard herself. But I checked the box that said, I am authorized, and typed it where the platform asked. I told myself it was a placeholder. I told myself, you always help. She pressed her palms together in her lap. I told myself a lot of things. Which of them were true? I asked. Her eyes flicked to Danny and back. That I wanted the wedding to look like I could afford more than I could. That my cousin Ava, she's been handling vendor outreach, kept sending me budget warnings with red exclamation points. She blew out a breath that trembled on the end. She told me to secure labor or cut the menu. I picked the first door. I put your name in the portal like it was Monopoly money. There it was, twist has shown, if you like tidy labels. Not an accident. A choice under pressure, polished with a story until it shined enough to pass. I looked at Danny, and he looked at the floor. Say the thing without cushions, I said to Brooke, not unkind. I forged consent, she said, and the word filled the room until we all had to sit up straighter. She gripped the bouquet stems like reins. I used your good reputation like a coupon. I am sorry. I nodded once. Apology is a door. Restitution is the hinge. I turned to the stack and lifted 2 smaller pages I'd printed that morning. Clean, plain, no perfume fonts. There are conditions, I said, and my voice was a paved road, not a dare. Not for drama, for change. I slid the first page toward her. Reimbursement summary, vendor names, deposits I'd laid out, cancellation fees I'd eaten, mileage to the marina. Dollar amounts that were more insult than ruin. You'll cover these, I said. Not because I can't, because the story has to finish the way it started on paper. Brooke nodded too fast, relief seeping in around the edges. Of course, today, the second, I said, laying down the next sheet, is a correction letter. It goes to everyone in your wedding ops thread, to the venue, and to family who were told I'd volunteered. You will say 3 sentences, that you entered my name without consent, that I canceled orders I had placed because I never agreed to work, and that future asks of me will be asked, not assumed, by email. I met her eyes. You will not say miscommunication. You will not say, we all agreed. You will not put my name next to a verb I didn't do. He's setting a bread. Brooke read the template, cheeks blotching in that earnest way that isn't pretty but might be true. I'll send it, she said. I'll sign it. She glanced at Danny. We'll sign it. Danny cleared his throat. We will. Good, I said. One more thing. I reached for a third card, handwritten, and slid it to the middle where all our hands could see. Ask, can, should. This is how you talk to me from now on. Ask if I want to. Ask if I can money, time, body. Ask if you should if the request keeps the relationship healthy. If any answer is no, the request is either modified or dropped, and if it's a yes, it lives in email. No more hallway favors. If your plan needs me, I'm a person at the planning table, not a line item. Brooke's eyes watered in a way that wasn't about saving face. You sound like someone who's had to say this too late in life. I sound like someone who got tired of explaining tiredness, I said. Tired of debt that arrived dressed like love. She laughed, then one shaky bark at her own expense. Ava's going to hate this, she said, and then clapped a hand to her mouth like she hadn't meant to let a third party breathe our air. Ava? I asked, though I already knew the shape of this. The cousin who handled vendors. She's the one who told me to put you down, Brooke admitted, softer. She kept saying weddings run on volunteerism and family synergy. She said if I could brand it as home-cooked and family-run, the pictures would do better. She stared at the correction letter like it might turn into a snake. She meant well. Intent and impact, I said again. Cousins. Brooke reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I'll Venmo you now, she said, and then seemed to remember the dignity of checks and paper trails. Or no, I'll bring a cashier's check and the signed letters tonight. I don't want this to live under a caption. Good, I said. Put it on paper and take it out of your feed. And letter not flat word. The blast. She looked at the sunflower apron and touched one corner with a fingertip, as if waiting for it to reprimand her. Will you ever wear it to my house again? She asked. Not fishing, just naming a fear. When I choose to, I said. When I am a guest who brings a dish because I want to, not because your budget needs me to. Brooke nodded like a student repeating a lesson back to a teacher to be sure she has it right. Ask, can, should, she said, almost a whisper. In writing. We sat with that until the room felt level. She signed the reimbursement list at the bottom where I'd left a line received. Agreed. She folded the letter template into her bag. She stood. At the door, she turned back, raw-faced, and 22 inside her 32. Evelyn, she said, I know this isn't the time for my biography, but if later there's There's a reason I push and pretend. It's not just pretty pictures." Her voice wobbled but didn't break. "I grew up being told a good woman is the one who gets it done without needing thanks. I borrowed that story, and I made you pay for it." "That," I said, "is another conversation, and it doesn't cancel today." I softened my mouth. "Bring me the check and the letter. We'll see what else there is to say." She nodded. No performance bow. Just a human leaving a room she'd finally named correctly. The door closed with an ordinary click that felt like something settling into the right groove. Danny let out a breath like a man who'd been holding a plank in a cold pool. "I didn't know about Ava," he said. "You know now," I said. "Knowing is how we stop repeating." We sat again, the 3 empty chairs like a punctuation mark. I put the papers back in their sleeve, set them beside the recipe box, and smoothed the apron the way I smooth a tablecloth before a meal ritual, not servitude. A breeze shook the porch screen. Somewhere, wind chimes told the neighborhood nothing and everything. You'd think that would be the end. It wasn't. The first truth had made it onto paper. The second, why Brooke needs the picture to be perfect even when the people aren't, was already pressing its face against the glass, asking to be let in. Brooke came back that evening with a cashier's check and eyes that had learned a new language in a single day. No lipstick, no filters, just the paper, signed, and a correction letter printed twice so I could keep one. She set both beside the blue recipe box, like she knew what could live next to my recipes and what could not. "I sent it to the thread and to the venue," she said, voice steady. "I wrote the words you asked. No miscommunication. No, we all agreed. I said I entered your name without consent. I said you canceled orders you never owed me. I said future asks will be asked by email." "Good," I said. "That's the first right thing. Sit." She did, with both hands folded like a student who finally stopped pretending she studied. "There's one more truth I owe you," she said, and this time she didn't look at Danny for help. "My mother died when I was 10. My aunt raised me on this sentence. A good woman gets it done without a fuss. I learned to swallow asks whole, to make miracles look easy, to turn panic into Pinterest. Somewhere along the way, I started thinking other women existed to prove I was doing it right." She looked at the sunflower apron still folded, still mine. "I put your name in the portal because I needed the picture to match the story I was selling about myself. It wasn't ignorance, it was hunger, and it wasn't fair. I let that sit until the silence felt honest. Understanding your wound doesn't waive my boundary," I said, "but it helps me choose the shape of it." Danny stood by the doorway, hands in his pockets like a boy waiting to see if recess was canceled. I reached for the page he'd signed earlier and slid a second, similar sheet across to Brooke. "Family Boundaries Acknowledgement." 2 paragraphs, 1 signature line. No legal thunder, just the weather report we'd live under. "You're on probation of respect for 6 months," I said. "That's not punishment, it's practice. Everything with me happens by email. No default assignments. No, you always. If a request needs me, it arrives with dates, details, and an out. If I say no, you let the no stand upright." I tapped the bottom line. "You sign, because pen quiets mouths." She read. She signed. Her name looked like she'd written it slower than she's ever written anything. "What do I do when I forget?" she asked, cheeks blotching in an honest way. "You don't ask me to fix it," I said. "You repair it where it broke, with the people you told wrong stories to, on paper." We stood then and moved to the kitchen, not to cook, but to post a new kind of recipe. I taped my boundary card to the refrigerator next to the photo of Danny at 6, with gumbo on his chin. The card looked small and mighty, like a rule that had been true all along, and finally got a frame. 6 months is both a blink and a year. It taught us our reflexes. There were near misses texts that read like assignments, a calendar invite that forgot to ask. But there were also emails with subject lines that made me smile. "Would you like to bring a pie? Could you consult for an hour? If not, I'll hire out." Brooke brought me 2 of those messages in person to practice hearing my no without shrinking. She didn't flinch. When her baby shower came, the invitation arrived addressed to Evelyn Harper, guest of honor. "Catered," it said in tidy type, and the RSVP was a link that didn't assume my calendar belonged to them. I wore a dress with pockets and brought a single lemon chess pie because I wanted to, not because the room would collapse without it. They seated me at a table with sunlight and chairs that didn't require hustling. When the waiter asked if I needed anything else, I heard the word and realized how long it had been since anyone asked me that without an invoice hiding underneath. After cake, Brooke handed me a small envelope, the kind that has weight without thickness. Inside was a photo of my sunflower apron, framed with a brass plate that said, "Choice, for your kitchen wall," she said, voice not trembling. So I remember who it belongs to. At the farmer's market the next Saturday, I stacked a short run of a one-page zine beside my pies, cooking with dignity boundary log checklist. Folks picked it up the way they take a recipe card from a church table. Some smiled, some teared up, some said, "I didn't know you could say it that way." I told them you can. I told them I learned late, but I learned. Back home, I hung the framed photo over the hook where the real apron sometimes rests and sometimes doesn't. The wind chimes fussed like old aunties and then settled. I ran my fingers over the boundary card on the fridge, traced the lines like a prayer said before a meal. Danny poured me tea and didn't ask for anything in return. Brooke texted a picture of a grocery receipt with the words, "Hired the help, happy to pay." It read like respect. You think the end of a story is fireworks, but sometimes it's paperwork and a quiet kitchen. Sometimes it's a hook with nothing on it because nothing needs to be. Sometimes it's a woman who finally understands that yes is sweetest when it isn't scared. If you want the little checklist I made, the one that kept my hands out of old habits, I'll leave a copy for you on the porch. It fits on one page, right next to the recipe for lemon chess. Here's the heart of it. Love isn't unpaid labor, and yes is sweetest when it isn't scared. Or, as Evelyn learned, a schedule is not consent. A mother is not a department. What does that look like in real life? Start small and concrete. Write your own 3-line boundary card and tape it where you'll see it. I'm not unpaid staff. Ask before you assign. No is not unloving. When a request lands, use 3C, calm, collect, confirm before you respond. Keep a simple family incident log date. Who asked, what was assumed, what you said. And try the 7 questions before you say yes. Do I want to? Can I time? Money? Body? Should I? Will this keep the relationship healthy? If any answer is no, offer a smaller yes or a kind no. This is everyday, lawful self-respect. It's also kinder to everyone in the long run. This is not legal advice. If you need an image to hold on to, think of Evelyn's sunflower apron on the hook and her blue recipe box on the table. The apron is choice, the recipe box is record. One reminds you your care is a gift. The other reminds you your boundaries deserve paper. And if you've been the one assuming help, there's room here too. Apologize cleanly, repair on paper, and ask next time. If this spoke to you, drop one sentence you'll tell yourself on hard days in the comments. Then download the one-page boundary log checklist in the description and subscribe for more quiet, steel-spine stories. May you sleep well tonight on boundaries you chose yourself.